I think we're ready to start. It's 10:02 Eastern Time. Welcome everybody to this webinar titled Unlocking Opportunities with Oats. This webinar is brought to you by Bridge to Food in collaboration with MBOLD. I'm Maria from Bridge to Food, and I will share the first few slides with an introduction about Bridge to Food and some housekeeping rules, as well as our agenda. So Bridge to Food is a global community driving food innovation by connecting fundamental science with real-world industry applications. We are a very broad community. We connect everybody along the supply chain, from commodity and ingredient growers and traders, processing technology providers, specialty ingredient manufacturers, CPGs, retail and food service providers, as well as universities and research institutions. Bridge to Food is based on three main pillars. We have our ecosystem, that is our virtual ongoing community meeting once a month on Tuesdays. And we meet on many different topics, from formulation challenges, regulatory, market trends, even startups and investments. So all the above. If you're interested in learning more, I will put a link in the chat to our ecosystem, and we hope to see you there. We have a jam-packed event calendar for the fall. We have in-person events, specifically Bridge to Food Europe, that happened in Copenhagen just in June. We will be back in the Netherlands next June, so stay tuned. And of course, Bridge to Food North America, I'm personally involved in, and that's coming up in October in Minneapolis. And we're very happy to be back to Minneapolis for the third year in a row and to partner with MBOLD for Bridge to Food North America. Last but not least, Bridge to Food over the past 5 years has been involved with several EU-funded projects, and we still have one running, hosting its final conference in August. And if you're interested to learn more, I can share more information to you. Okay, so as I said, Bridge to Food North America is coming up in Minneapolis on October 13th to the 15th. On this Friday, August the 7th, our super early bird rate is ending. So if you want to secure your ticket at the lowest possible rate, make sure to buy your ticket today or by Friday, because as of Saturday, August the 8th, prices will go up. So if you scan this QR code, you can learn more about the event and secure your ticket today. Okay, switching gears, some housekeeping rules. So this webinar is really a community meeting. We want everybody to feel welcome. We want everybody to feel engaged. That's why I was encouraging you to introduce yourself in the chat. Please keep your microphones muted. I can hear somebody has their microphones on. Please make sure your microphones are muted. Otherwise, I will mute you. But we do want you to ask questions. Please feel free to ask questions as they pop in your head during the presentations. That's not a problem. We want to make sure that everybody asks questions, and your questions will be addressed at the end. I will read them through the chat in the order they were received, and our speakers, Mehmet and Heidi, will address them. You're welcome and encouraged to keep your cameras on. Please beware that this session is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable on camera, turn it off. The recording will be made available afterwards. And last is our agenda for today. So I will very soon hand it over to Heidi Theo from Sanotta. She will introduce the MBOLD Protein Catalyst initiative and this 3-phase oat research strategy. After, Mehmet Tulbeck from the Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center will present the findings from the phase 1 of this oat research, and also give us some insights, preliminary insights from phase 2. We will wrap things up at around 9:40 Central, 10:30 Eastern, with some discussion and also some closing remarks. We will talk about the timeline for the next phases, some opportunities to connect. So I will see you in about 40 minutes. And now I will hand it over to Heidi. Heidi, I will ask you to share your screen, or Mehmet, you will share your screen. Whatever is easier.
Heidi, I can do it for you if you like.
Yeah, we were actually trying to share the screen earlier. Sorry, folks. And it was sharing the notes, not the slides, and that's
perfect.
So now we're good. Okay, well, good morning. I'm really happy that all of you made the time to join. I'm Heidi Teo. I'm VP of R&D at SunOpta. I am also part of MBOLD's Catalyst plant protein team. I'm joined today by my friend Mehmet Tulbek, president of Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center. MBOLD is working with Mehmet to conduct not only our phase 1, which we'll talk about today, but he is continuing to partner with MBOLD on some of the phase 2 work, which you will hear about at the end. And it's been an honor and a lot of fun to work with Mehmet and his team. We're here today to share the recent research into ways to further develop oat as a protein-based ingredient and optimize the value that can be generated from the associated side streams. I'll give a quick introduction to MBOLD for those who are not aware of MBOLD yet before I hand it over to Mehmet to share the research. Next slide, please. So MBOLD is a coalition of leading food and ag companies, research institutions, others that are based here in Minnesota, but have national and global reach, including General Mills, Cargill, Target, Schwann's. You see a whole bunch of folks on the slide. The coalition's mission is to accelerate practical solutions to major food challenges in food and agriculture. Really, we're talking about climate and sustainability concerns and sort of the intertwined issues of growing global demand for food in the face of supply chain instability and increasing natural resource limitations. Through MBOLD's Protein Catalyst initiative, we're exploring how plant protein can become a bigger part of the protein solution at commercial scale. We're doing this in close collaboration with the partners, which are on the right-hand side, including my organization, SunOpta, but also the Buehler Group, Protein Industries Canada, PPIC at the University of Minnesota, and many others. Next slide, please. Current projections are showing global demand for protein is going to rise by at least 50% by 2050. So we're working together on a pre-competitive basis to drive innovation and stability by tackling the key barriers to greater market success of the plant proteins. Namely, we're looking into oats, navy, and pinto beans, and then the next generation of chickpea as genetics proceed as food ingredients. Next slide. We're doing this through the pre-competitive, commercially oriented research, which is really designed to shed light on what's possible for these botanicals and then make the research public through webinars like today and other venues via MBOLD's website and through ongoing industry dialogue. This slide shows you some of the key issues that MBOLD is trying to unpack. What are the superpowers? What are the optimal processing methods, valorization of side streams, et cetera, all of which feed into how do we get to cost competitive products, which is one of the biggest challenges to providing these new solutions. Next slide. So there's 3 phases of the protein catalyst research. The first one, which we'll talk about today, is looking into a comprehensive review of what research has been done on oats, what does the processing technology look like, and pulling those together, doing an analysis to look at what are the protein opportunities, and again, what is that side stream valorization. The next phase is phase 2, where the outcomes from phase 1, which Mehmet will be talking about, doing some additional work on the specific ingredient development, mapping those processes, looking at what the costs for those are, and looking at some of the functionalities. The last phase is really taking those ingredients, assuming that we've approached a processing method and we have ability through waste stream valorization to get to something that we believe will truly be cost competitive in the marketplace. The third phase would be to then take those specific ingredients and really do a deep dive on what are the appropriate applications and the commercial and consumer propositions. So that's where the rubber really hits the road, and that's what are the products we can create and how might we bring this to life in the marketplace. So the aim here really is to kind of advance the state of knowledge to the point that ingredient houses and processors really have an understanding for how this might be done and belief that this can be done in a way that is commercially viable. And CPG companies will say, we understand the possibilities and we understand how it intersects with what we need and what our consumers need.
Thank you,
With
Heidi.
that, I would like to introduce Mehmet Tolbeck, president of the Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center. When he is done speaking, we'll have an opportunity to go through all of your questions. So please use the chat as they occur to you. We'd love to hear your questions. We'd love to hear your feedback about the findings, overall approach. With that, Mehmet, take it away.
Thank you, Heidi. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are dialing. It's been an honor to talk about this topic, and really great to work with Heidi and MBOLD team, as well as Bridge to Food for the organization. So with this, over the last couple of months, we worked on this in detail and really reviewed the overall potential of the oat as a protein ingredient and as a functional ingredient, and as a matter of full capacity utilization, depending on the milling, processing functionalities. How can we really increase and capture the full capacity of the oats? And really, this is, we basically wrapped up the report. There's a full report about this as well, but this is only the presentation of our findings and some of the, the suggestions and what can be done in the future in terms of some of the oat ingredients and the byproducts to capture the value of the protein. When we look at the oats compared to some of those major crops like in the wheat, soybean, corn, or others, they're like close to like a billion metric ton crops around the world, like 800, 900 million metric tons, depending on the years. So these are really huge crops. But when we look at the oats, globally, we are looking at 28 to 30 million metric ton, and it's a very specialty crop, and it's basically a really dear crop for so many consumers, from Gen X's, the Gen Ys, all the way to baby boomers. They're consuming oats in different capacities, whether it's in a breakfast cereal or flake or oat milk or different type of products, and it's really well received by the consumers. And over the last probably 2 decades, we are seeing a consistent growth around the oat milk, bakery, snack, and different type of products. So when we looked at the overall study, we did see 2 areas that I think we should focus. The first one was to look at the dry milling and air classification of the oat flour into oat protein concentrate and oat starch concentrate, to look at possibly create the pathway for future high protein varieties, to investigate what can be done and what is the overall possibilities, to look at some new ingredient solutions for future research development. And this is basically a really mathematical game. If we can start with the higher protein genotype variety, similar to like a peas, lentils, favas, we can reach out to higher levels for these type of products. And the second one is we captured basically the potential of okara, and we look at basically how can we capture the overall protein from okara as an oat milk processing byproduct, and to capture the values of the oat protein, oat fiber, and beta-glucan, and to learn some of the findings and some of the good experiences what some European companies are doing, and then to look at it, especially in United States and North America in different capacities. So when we look at the overall possibilities in the oats, it's all about the sustainable processing, vertical integration, and really creating that whole value and to capture that complete capacity utilization. And these technologies can be valuable tools for us in the future. So when we look at the composition of the oats, it's a fairly complex crop, and it's fairly difficult to deal with depending on the functionality and depending on the composition. First of all, we are looking at a fairly nutritious cereal grain, and compared to other cereal grains, probably this is one of the highest PDCAS protein quality. Maybe it's close to quinoa, but like really ranked high in terms of the protein quality with all the cereals. In addition, they are not only high protein, but also they have high lipid content and high dietary fiber, especially the beta-glucan. And with this lipid and the enzyme activity can make it fairly challenging in terms of processing. And depending on the application, depending on the process, what we are applying, it may be difficult to handle to capture some of the values. So not only we are looking at what can we do now, there's a potential to breed and adapt high protein or high protein hulless varieties to improve the yield and the process efficiencies in the long term for these products. So if you look at the overall the varieties, what are being captured, what are being produced at the moment, and it's really quite complex in North America. When you look at Canada, we are growing about 4 million metric ton of oats, and it's about 80% of it is milling oats. It's really high quality milling oats, and it's basically utilized in the food market primarily. When you look at the United States, there's about 1.5, 1.6 million metric ton production, but it's only 30% of it is milling oats. And it's not exactly the same quality what the Canadian varieties deliver for the specific products, whether it's an oat milk or flakes or other products. So there is definitely that type of complexity in the system. In addition to that, there are different varieties coming. There's high protein, high beta glucan. There are varieties specific for oat milk and beverage, and there are varieties coming for beta glucan concentrate and functional foods. And it's a fairly complex system and not easy to keep all stakeholders happy. And the millers and ingredient manufacturers, they're trying to be as flexible as possible with the system. So if you look at the overall oat biorefinery technology map, I mean, that's basically the overall breakdown of what we have from all the way raw oats coming to the groats and the hulls and going into different type of streams. The top portion is, as you can see, it's the typical process from raw oats to cleaning, dehulling, kilning, groats, and the hull separation. And then after that, we are looking at the values. We are looking at the dry milling fractionation, wet fractionation, oat milk process, and possibly a hybrid process to capture the Okara. There's Okara valorization, and there are all the different values what we can capture. And these are some prices that we established this summer, but they are like subject to change depending on the crop quality, agri-food transformation cost, manufacturing cost, depending on the country. But we think that these are some of the prices we can capture depending on where we go with the market products. So the first research stream that we recommended was to look at the dry milling and air classification. And basically, it's a matter of number game. So if you start with like a 1 metric ton of raw oats with about 27, 28% of the separation will be the hulls. So we start about 750 to 730 oat flour from groats to oat flour. And after that, we need to go through a milling fractionation process to produce the oat protein concentrate and oat starch concentrate. Now, depending on the protein level of the oat flour, depending on the genotype protein and the type of protein, we can reach out different protein concentrate levels and different yields. So that's something to be captured. The reason why, because there are so many new facilities coming up more on the pulses. And this is really one of the most sustainable, the cleanest carbon footprint. And it's one of the most cleanest protein and ingredient manufacturing technologies available out there. And it can be achieved with a lower capex. It can be developed with an established manufacturing footprint, can be easily scaled, and the technology is readily available and fairly high level automation. And the yields are critical. Like if we can reach out the right yields and we can come up with the right type of process, and this can be really scaled up. The main thing is what are the prices we'll be reaching at? What are the yields we'll be reaching at? So if we start with, let's say, 30, 35% protein here, then possibly we can reach out 60, 65, 70% protein with the right type of yield and fractionation. But if we start with 15, then we can go much lower yields. And then it's a matter of like examination of that process. But again, these products, they have to be really investigated because that's an area, especially we are seeing more and more in the pulses, this type of technology. It has to be really implemented and looked at more in the cereals. And cereals, yes, they may have a different type of starch granule, the protein and the starch. It's not exactly as in a fluffy matrix like the pulses, but again, they're different type of ACM and the milling technologies. We can break those. That is a possibility. I see that there's a comment on the dehulling. That's fairly right, correct. But we may reduce the fat level in the breeding side too. So that is an area that like we are just looking at, and as an industry, it's been looked at. Those are some of the areas. That's the same problem we are seeing in the chickpeas too. Chickpeas is about 7% oil, and it may be quite challenging in the dry fractionation. And those are some of the things that we can address in the oats as well. The second one is basically to look at the research stream on the oat okara utilization, and it's pretty much for each oat milk manufacturing, we end up quite a bit of wet okara in terms of process, and then of course 75 to 80% of this product is moisture, and depending on the removing all of the moisture and the drying process, there are possibilities that we can remove the protein, a carb syrup, and a fiber residue, possibly some beta-glucan and some cellulose lignins, and a fairly high fiber-rich residue. So that's an area that MBOLD tasked us to look at, the second phase. So we are looking at some basic extraction technologies, looking at the research, in particular the research conducted in Europe. How are they reaching out? What are the type of products? So we are investigating and looking at like what is the overall value, what's the overall yield, and what's the type of protein and functionality, and can we achieve this? Can we scale this up in a commercial level? And there are some examples happening in Europe, and is this something that can be done in North America? And we can create some commercialization pathway and potential solutions, and create some collaboration between the companies and the industry to look at this type of work. Based on some of our early findings, again, this is a matter of protein content to start with. If you start with a higher protein versus if you start with a lower protein, that's basically one of the factors affecting the protein extraction and the yields and the type of products that we are looking at. The technology, the process is fairly established. There's quite a bit of data, even several patents and IP established in the European Union. But the main thing is to look at what's the protein level we start, and what's the overall protein extraction, the yields, and the other products that we can capture within this process. So for the strategy for phase 2 research, again, there are two streams that we identified, and the reasons for that is pretty much because of the lower capital investment, lower operating cost, possibly, especially in terms of dry fractionation, much lower water use, and hybrid systems. There will be some water use, some drying technologies. In terms of ingredient purity, sustainability, process complexity, product value, ingredient, and the scalability. So these are some of the reasons that we justified that we looked at, we should look at the dry fractionation and the hybrid systems. And really the main focus is to look at the complete crop utilization, address the sustainability needs, adapt success, what we are seeing in EU and some of the great markets penetration, perhaps in North America. It really fits really well with the current market trends, with the GLP-1, especially with the protein and fiber opportunities. And then in particular with oat okara utilization, as the starch is basically hydrated and utilized within the process. And there's possibility to utilize the current facilities and the capacity in US and in North America and Canada to look at possibilities to retrofit some of the corn gluten facilities or other type of wheat gluten facilities, which they use much more water. So there are possibilities to utilize some of the old facilities to retrofit them for additional okara utilization. So with that, those are some of our observations, what we saw. I saw some questions in the chat box, and I think especially on the, I agree, Alexei, on your comment, if we start with the 10-11% oats, dry milling is very challenging, but depending on the varieties we can source, depending on the varieties we can look at, especially, and that's what the lupin and the chickpea, they are going in that direction. They are trying to, on the breeding side and on the genotype development side, they're trying to reduce the fat levels so that they can reach out better fractionation and separation solutions by using dry fractionation, that they can reach 55, 60, 65% protein. So with that, I'll leave the floor to the questions. Heidi and I will be glad to answer your questions and address if you have any comments or questions. Thank you.
Yeah. I've been monitoring the chat, and Mehmet, you did a fantastic job already addressing the questions as you were reading the slides. That was really impressive. I know it's not easy, but maybe just to break the ice, I will start with a question, kind of a segue into the discussion here. I wanted to ask Heidi and Mehmet, both of you, what excites you the most about all this research going into oats, and what resources do you think you need to really answer all the open questions? And perhaps somebody in the audience today has the answers or wants to collaborate.
Yeah, so I'll take that first, and then I'll let Mehmet speak also. You know, I am a product formulator by trade. And so one of the things that is always a challenge is when consumers want to have a functional improvement or a nutritional improvement in a product, but they don't love what you have to use to put in it. And the thing that is most exciting to me is that people already appreciate oats. They love oats. We all know that oats are good for us. We're all open to eating oats. And so it is fantastic to me that there is an opportunity to have a really neutral tasting protein source that is already embraced and understood as delivering healthful benefits. It's rare that you get the opportunity for that kind of a win-win, and it's truly exciting. I will sneak in a second reason. The thing about the phase 2 that is particularly exciting to me as well is, for anyone who looks at what we do at SunOpta, we certainly have a very large non-dairy portfolio. And one of the things that we are always concerned about is how do we valorize these side streams? So if there is a real opportunity to do something powerful with the Okara waste stream, that's a whole different kind of win-win, I think, for all of us, because it is a readily available. There are many, many producers of that Okara, and they're all looking for a really great way to utilize that protein. So those, I think, are the most exciting things for me.
Yeah. Maria, just to add, I mean, the main thing really quite excites me with this is there's so much interest in the oats. And as I mentioned, from 10-year-old to 80-year-old, everybody loves oats. So they like oat milk, they like oat products. It's basically a really fairly dear product for so many consumers from all different generations. So that really makes it quite exciting to work on oats, oat ingredients, oat products.
Maybe building on that. So on the flip side, what are the current technical or cost barriers related to oats? We've been highlighting all the benefits, but what are the downsides as of now?
I think the main thing that I see a challenge here is the raw material consistency. What type of product will be using this to capture the value of the protein or the byproducts? Because what we are seeing, even coming from oat milk as a byproduct, the product is not coming quite consistent. So that makes it little, I think in the long term, it's going to make it challenging. Like, how are we going to establish these processes depending on the raw material coming? And again, cost of manufacturing, available labor, workforce, and capacity in North America. And let's face it, there's a huge interest right now from especially the new consumers more in the traditional proteins. We are seeing more and more on dairy consumption and capacity coming up, more in meat protein and capacity coming up. So we really need to fit this, not only in terms of taste, flavor, but also cost, so that the consumers will continue consuming these. We cannot be too high in terms of the price.
Yeah, and I would echo, the sort of the bioactivity level of that Okara, and how do we, to Mehmet's point, how do we move that material to a facility that will produce protein? Is that something that would need to be produced very closely? Does it need to be dried? I think there's definitely some linkage processing that needs to be worked out. That will certainly provide challenges. It will be a key unlock.
Thank you very much. We have one question in the chat from Sophie. Sophie is asking if is fermentation also considered to increase the nutritional value and possibly to improve the functionality?
Thank you for the question, Sophie, and I can address that. Definitely a fairly formidable technology to increase the protein content by using the right technologies, in particular mycelial fermentation, like using these byproducts, co-products, we can triple the content, the protein content in these products. If we start with an oat base products, we can reach 35, 40, 45% protein in the dry matter. Like if you use mycelial protein, especially like portobellos or different type of products, that's basically a major possibility, but the functionality is going to be quite complex in those products. When you get into mycelial, not only you produce protein, then you have chitin, quite a bit of fibers and minerals. It's a very complex system added on these substrate, whether it's oat hulls or oat byproducts or oat okara. So it's a fairly rich, very high value product protein, but the overall functionality has to be worked on and has to be investigated further.
I would add to that that's really also part of this phase 2 going into phase 3. When bringing on sort of oat protein as a new category of ingredients, one of the things that we'll need to look at is what makes sense for the first SKUs versus what does that family of SKUs look like? And some of these that might be a little more complicated to get to are items that appear later as we get those processes to commercial viability. But it certainly is one of the pieces is understanding where do we have enough volume and can create a sufficient amount of these proteins, and then what products, what is the functionality, and then what categories of products do they marry it up to? From a product developer's standpoint, we really aspire to a protein that doesn't taste like anything and works in every product we want to make. That is not an achievable goal, but to that end, it is one of the things that we'll really want to explore to make sure that we are providing a protein, or we're proposing a process that gets to a protein that is kind of widely functional and usable.
Thank you very much, Heidi and Mehmet. I did ask in the chat, and I see some are actually, there are some answers coming up. But before that, I will leave you some time to address the questions I put in the chat. Please go check it out. But I actually have a question, because we talked a lot about protein, concentrates, isolates, and so on. We haven't talked as much about fiber. And maybe just a quick question, because the interest around fiber is growing finally. It's only taken us decades, but it seems that consumers are finally more aware.
We're on a journey.
Of the fact that we are on a journey, but it seems that there are more product claims. Do you see any opportunities in that area? So really making oat a great source of fiber and widely used in the industry for its fiber content that can be alongside the protein extraction, obviously.
I'll answer from a commercial standpoint, and then I'll let Mehmet address that from based on the work that he's doing and the research on possibilities. From a commercial standpoint, absolutely, not to be a commercial. The Okara stream is rich in fiber as well, and certainly if there is an opportunity to provide a product that perhaps delivers both protein and fiber, certainly kind of now is the time where it appears that fiber is finally going to step into at least a small spotlight or a space on the stage. So I think there's real possibilities there, and then depending on the functionality of the fiber, I think that will become really important, because it really determines what products you can use it in. But absolutely, fiber's starting to get on the stage.
Yes, I would echo, Heidi's comments. To me, there's a huge interest in fiber, in particular the soluble fiber, because of so many health benefits of the product. And that's an area growing. We are readdressing, almost 15, 20 years later, we are catching up with fiber back again because of all the protein interest and the plant-based so forth. To me, fiber is really coming strong, and it's going to be a matter of transformation cost, the price of these ingredients, and the point of entry. But we expect to see a lot of growth in the beverages, functional beverages, and snacks in the fiber utilization.
Thank you. And I would encourage anybody in the audience who also works on fiber, better if it's oat fiber, but any type of fiber, to pitch in the chat. But we do have a long question from Ram from Bay State Milling. Thank you very much, Ram, for providing this question. And there are a few points here, so I will read it. Thinking about the economics of producing oat protein concentrates, did phase 1 research estimate the cost of implementing classification technology? For example, what does low capex mean? And then I will be back with the second part.
I can answer those. Thanks, Ram, for the question. Yes, we looked at it. Actually, there were some numbers in that last slide, but we removed it for the presentations. Let me give you some context. If you put say 100,000 metric ton oat growth facility for dry fractionation, the cost will be about, like, roughly, if you have the land, everything will be about $100 million. If you put a fractionation with a wet fractionation facility, it will be $400 to $600 million, depending on what you are putting at. And plus your yields and your protein sales costs and the overall development of that market will be much higher. That's what I meant, And there's one area that we are not talking so much. When you are in the concentrate business, there's also the pet food business that you capture right away. I mean, that's a huge business, 7 to 8% growth rate every year in North America, $30 to $32 billion business. And there's still a huge interest in the functional products, and they capture a lot of concentrates, and especially the starch concentrates as binders, fiber, and so forth. So it's a matter of, look, how fast you can sell these, how fast you can capture, and what's the overall investment you put in these facilities to transform that amount of product. So that's what I mean, the low capex in their classification will be much lower in terms of wet isolation. That's why we scratched the wet isolate. The price per pound of all protein concentrates, we looked at that too, and it's about the yield of the protein concentrate, the initial raw material protein, the yield of the protein. But we think that it'll be minimum, depending on let's say if it's a 50%, it won't be less than $8 to $9 US. So it may be kind of high price for a 50% protein, but that's basically what we looked at in terms of the yield.
Thank you very much.
That, Mehmet.
No problem, Ram. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for addressing already both parts to the question. We have another question or a comment. The issue with oat okra is that all the soluble part is already taken out, and what remains is non-functional. So you need a lot of intensive processing to valorize it further. I don't know who wants to comment on this comment, Heidi or Mehmet.
I can address that. I agree with you about partially. And that's a fairly good comment. But again, it's a matter of the type of okra coming. There are like 15 to 20 different type of oat milks, the byproduct coming out. And in many ways, depending on the solubilization, hydrolysis, yes, the soluble part is already taken out. But you have to remember, the industry is looking for protein, period. So if you are basically putting these products in a bakery snack, you may not need so much functionality like you are putting in a beverage type of product. So at the end, it's a matter of protein and capturing the value. And if you have the markets that you can capture the value, especially in bakery, snack, pasta, different type of kind of a low moisture products, you may not need a very high level functionality, but we're not saying that we'll be using the old protein coming from okra to capture it back again in beverage. You're right on that. That type of solubility is not readily available, but there is good quality protein there.
And I would add to that is really to some degree one of the central objects that we are looking at in the phase 3 research. Again, functionality is a very, very broad word. Depending on the product categories and what you're developing, functionality means very different things. What works fantastic for one type of product does not work fantastically in other types of products. And so it is really about understanding what is the protein, that's the superpower comment that I had made earlier. It really gets at what is this protein great for? There are no perfect proteins. With love as a formulator, they just don't all work in everything, but they have their superpowers, and that is one of the challenges in phase 3 is what is that superpower? Is it sufficiently super? And how do we get to that place? But definitely for sure, there's a lot of protein to be had. And I think both Mehmet and I acknowledge that the reason Okara isn't currently being upcycled into all kinds of protein products is that there are some challenges and there's some hurdles. We just really believe that that's a significant path to success for a protein ingredient.
Thank you very much for your answers. In terms of superpowers, so there is a question related to this last comment. So in terms of functional properties, what oat proteins are superior in which properties, if you can be more specific? So speaking about functionality. And I'm assuming superior to, I'm assuming other plant protein or perhaps protein in general.
Yeah,
Rashid, if you wish, you can specialize.
Yeah, I can address just the first couple comments. When you look at the protein functionality, is it in as-is format versus a modified format? Is it in an oat milk format? I mean, it's a matter of like how this protein to be functionalized and utilized. But like in terms of currently what we know, it's about nutrition and some binding and maybe emulsification, some basic for like a functionalities. It's not like a well-known as one of the top superior proteins as is, but depending on the process, that's the reason like we are using it on oat milk in terms of solubility and capturing the value in the beverages and smoothies or other products. This question will be able to answer more depending on where this product goes in terms of utilization. But really, the main interest right now, I can tell, is the nutrition, especially if you look at all the cereal proteins in terms of nutrition quality, the PDCAS protein quality, it's especially within the cereals, it's one of the best, like fairly close to quinoa. And then there's a huge potential to combine this with pulses, which are like quite deficient in methionine and cysteine, some of the sulfur-rich amino acids. So there's potential to use it just as a nutritional powerhouse and to look at other properties too.
Thank you very much, Mehmet. We have, it's a question made of two parts from Matt from One Bio. It's a startup that I personally love, working a lot on fiber. And Matt is just noting that as beta-glucan only makes up a single-digit percentage points of the overall composition, it is hard to justify the cost of buying and isolating it from oats. With okra streams, we have had a hard time finding oat milk manufacturers that stabilize those waste streams. What do you think it will take for oat milk manufacturers, and we have one here today, obviously Sanopta, to invest in the stabilization infrastructure so that okra stream can be valorized? And I think probably, Heidi, you're the natural person to respond to this question.
So, I think at the end of all of this, whether you're a processor, and we're an interesting organization in that we are both B2B and B2C. So, because we do have vertical integration. And so for any business, whether you are a processor or you are a CPG purchasing ingredients, I think one of the things that that requires the investment is just a really fundamental understanding of what is the equipment, what is the ROI, and some validation that these will produce products that are absolutely functional and usable. I would say that covers a very sort of broad list of research objectives. And one of the biggest challenges is that oat milk manufacturers don't necessarily have all of those pieces in place. So it is very complicated from an in-house standpoint to just make and invest in that work. So it is actually part of why it's such good work for MBOLD to do, in that we are looking at it broader, pre-competitive. Really, the idea from an MBOLD standpoint is, how do we really provide some of that proof of concept? How do we get that over the hump, and then have a little bit more granular idea of what would this cost? At the end of the day, it is about ROI. It is about sustainability. It is about what can that product do? And so I think all of those pieces historically have been caught up in, they cover so many categories, and most oat milk manufacturers, even vertically integrated ones, are not also doing finished processing or further refining of those streams. So I really am hopeful that it's research like this that will help some of those organizations, including my own, get over the hump on what the possibilities could be on this.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And I will just read the last part to Matt's question or comment. And so as per the comment on solubility, OneBio has a technology that allows to solubilize insoluble fibers. So even low solubility okra can be valorized into highly functional short chain fibers. So maybe Matt just put the link to OneBio's website in the chat and people can check it out. But thank you for your question. And we are being flooded with questions now. So next question is from Cynthia. Have you compared the cost benefit of using okra to replace other common protein such as soy, whey, etc., or fiber such as inulin, soluble corn fiber, etc., ingredients typically used in, for example, bakery products?
Not yet. I mean, on that one, I can answer. Basically, Heidi explained it in her last slide. That's part of the phase 3, I think. So I'll leave it to Heidi there.
Yeah, I mean, some of these initial, phase 2 is about, let's get to what are the protein ingredients that come from what we believe to be commercially viable processes, and then moving into phase 3, really, where is that appropriate? And for sure, Cynthia, there will be cost assessment and an understanding on where can this be used. I think, whether it's the elephant in the room or not, one of the realities of developing botanicals or developing new protein sources of any kind is really to really have general acceptance and broad usage, which is the goal. Like, let's really produce a lot of protein and provide a real potential solution. We have to get to something that is cost competitive. Without subsidies, I'm not sure that cost parity is always the thing, but certainly it has to be cost competitive in order for certainly very large CPGs to start seeing this go into a significant amount of products. So for sure, cost has to be a piece of this, definitely. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And then we have a question from Sarah. So we're going upstream here. We're talking about farmers. How difficult is it for farmers to step into these opportunities? What would farmers need to successfully grow these oats for these qualities or components? I'm not sure who wants to address this.
I mean, I can tackle a couple of things. First, I mean, it's important for the farmers, growers, to work with the manufacturers. Who are the manufacturers? Initially, the millers and oat milk or ingredient manufacturers, depending on the how the overall business pathways move there. It's really important to understand what your market needs and to work with your millers and processors, what they are utilizing, what they are capturing, because they know the trends, they know what they are selling. that is the best way because that is the overall gateway where you're going to be selling your products. And if you can come up from breeding side with some new varieties, with some identity preserved, more like a closed loop type of varieties, then that would be a much better way to capture the overall functionality, to grow it at much larger scale, and to capture the value proposition from milling on the oat milk all the way to the byproduct utilization. Be part of the chain, be part of the supply chain.
Thank you, Mehmet. Maybe, well, before I have one last question, and then I guess we have to start wrapping up. But before doing that, I wanted to remind the audience that MBOLD and the Protein Catalyst Initiative will share the results of phase 1, not just oats, but we will also talk about dry beans and chickpeas at Bridge to Food North America. So if you're interested in this research, make sure to join us in Minneapolis in October. We actually have another question, so 2 questions. So I will just keep mine for later, and maybe we can quickly address both of them. Another question from Ram from Bay State Milling. As part of phase 1 literature review, were you able to find data or studies on how different processing technologies influence their PDCAS or digestibility, as this could influence processing approaches and potential protein claims?
Yes, there are a couple of papers published from European institutes, research institutes. I cannot remember exactly. There are certain differences, but not quite significant, Ram, to be honest. I need to look at, we need to get back to you on that. But overall, the numbers, we haven't seen any significant differences depending on some of these processes based on the impact on PDCAS and digestibility.
Thanks, Mehmet.
I will read the last question from Elvira Casas. She's working at the in technologies of supercritical fluids at ENIA, a technological center placed in Spain. And she's congratulating you for another great session. And she just wanted to share a hint regarding the air classification and the challenge about fat content. So she's saying that defatting could be achieved in an efficient way by extraction with supercritical CO2 without using organic solvents. And in her team at ENA has a long experience of more than 20 years in CO2, so you can connect with her. And they recently have tested the supercritical CO2 defatting as a pre-treatment to air classification at pilot scale, and the results were promising. And I guess you can connect with her, but do you have, Mehmet or Heidi, do you have any comments on supercritical CO2?
I completely agree. Very valid point. It's just a matter of scale and transformation cost. If we can capture this at the scale that we can capture the level of the protein, starch, fiber, it's definitely a valuable tool. So it'll be good to talk about some of the scale and capacities and the cost of transformation, capturing that oil. And there's also definitely a huge interest in the cosmetic market for the oat oils. So there are like additional markets there that can be captured. I'll reach out to Elvira definitely to communicate more.
And I see in the chat that they're saying that VTT, it's a research institute in Finland, also patented this supercritical CO2 defatting and air classification. So it seems that VTT has also done extensive work on the topic. But my initial question, or final question, I should say, was just on phase 2. So are there any partners? Are you looking for partners? And so what's coming up for Heidi, I guess?
Yeah. So if you actually put up my last slide, sorry, Mehmet, can you put the last slide back up?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Nope, that's fine. We're good.
I'll share.
Yep. Here. So certainly, so the last slide, I have my email on there. I would absolutely, and I saw that several folks in the chat had said that they are interested in having further conversation. Please use my email. Send me an email and let me know that, so I have your contact information. absolutely would love to continue dialogue with any of you offline. Thank you for the hints and the possible new connections. From an MBOLD standpoint and this research, always welcoming and looking for more partners. We absolutely invite engagement. We know that engagement is a huge piece of how we do this successfully. So please don't hesitate to flood my email with contact, because we would love to connect with all of you. And then the additional, I know that Maria already said this, but I just want to also let everyone know, remind you that the report with the phase 1 will definitely, the long report will be issued in the next few weeks. Follow MBOLD on LinkedIn. If you'd like, you can certainly receive the report that way, or if you just keep an eye on the MBOLD website, it will also show up there. And the website is on there. I would say just the last comment is that, it was exciting to work on this phase 1. I think phase 2 will become even more exciting. So we will be looking to share some of those initial results with you later this year with our friends at Bridge to Food. So by all means, if you are attending Bridge to Food, please come find us. We would love to meet you. We would love to connect.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And it is exciting. It was exciting for me to be part of this webinar. I think you did a fantastic job, not only presenting the results of phase 1, but also in this great discussion. I wasn't expecting so many questions. We filled more than 25 minutes with questions. So that was really impressive. So I also want to thank the audience for being quite engaged and for tuning in today. We are 2 minutes before the official end, but I think we can give you 2 minutes back to your time. You will receive the recording via MBOLD, and it will be available on the MBOLD website. So if you missed any parts of this webinar, you are able to watch it again on demand. With this, we will close the call, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And I see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.